Another exciting episode of Build Rights with LABCA. Hello Lagos, my name is Oni Oluwaseyi and currently this show with me is Damlola Ajiboye. Hello Lagos once again. On today's episode, we're going to be talking to you about distress buildings, what they are, causes of distress buildings, signs of distress buildings, and preventive measures against building collapse. All right, so let's have a recap of the weekly activity of the agency. The agency was present at the World Habitat Day, which held on the 4th of October 2022 at the Adeyemi Bureau Auditorium in Alausa, Ikeja. The theme, Mind the Gap, Leave No One and No Place Behind. Let's see a brief report on that.
The Lagos State Government, through the Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development, recently marked the 2022 World Habitat Day celebration with the theme Mind the Gap, Leave No One and No Place Behind. The Lagos State Governor, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, was ably represented at the event by the Secretary to the State Government, Mrs. Folashade Jaji. Also present were the Honorable Commissioner, Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development, Engineer Bangbushe Martins, the Special Advisor to the Governor on EGIS and Planning Matters, Dr. Olajide Babatunde, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Physical Planning and Urban Development, Engineer Mrs. Abiola Koshigbe, agencies' general managers, professionals in the beauty industry, traditional rulers, among other dignitaries.
We all have a responsibility to ensure that our communities are orderly, organized, and sustainable.
Mind the gap, leave no one and no place behind. Seeks to direct global attention to the growing inequalities and vulnerabilities that have been exacerbated by what is referred to as the Triple C crisis. Number one, COVID-19. Number two, climate change. And number three, conflict. This is the Triple C. Also similar to this is the ExAs, which as a state we experience and we have risen above.
The World Habitat Day, and it marks Urban October, which is a program that is celebrated all over the world in terms of trying to bring sustainable development to the people. For this year, we have the theme, which is Mind the Gap, Leave No One and No Place Behind. I think the whole theme encapsulates the whole idea of sustainable development. Like was said by some of the speakers, if when you are developing and you don't develop, you don't think about the lower income, you're planning for failure. And so what we need to do is to ensure that we carry out holistic planning in Lagos State that takes care of both the high income and the low income. That way, we are working towards sustainable development. When we talk about inclusiveness, one of the speakers was talking about the idea of master planning. When you plan for the whole state, either master plan, either model city plan, either action area plan, when you plan for the whole state, inclusiveness is ensuring that the citizens participate. And one of the things she mentioned was that for us in this part of the world, when people are invited to come and participate, the response is usually slow or even non-existent. And at the end of the day, what happens is that after the plans have been made, that's when people now realize, oh, there are some plans that have been made. So for us in physical planning and urban development, this is very important. Publicity, enlightenment, whatever name you want to call it, it's important that we continue to take our message to the people. It's important that whenever we're developing policies and programs, we also ensure that the public, the citizens, are aware of it.
Well, amongst other things, I know that LABCA, particularly the general manager, Bola Oki, he's up to the task. A lot of issues that we have had in the past, we're trying to identify the root causes and then come up with an holistic solution that will help put a stop, zero tolerance to collapse building in Lagos. I mean, on my part, as a special advisor on EGIS, we're trying to deploy technology into building control activities in Lagos. We have the Lagos Watch, which is satellite based, where through satellite imagery we'll be able to view all ongoing development within the state. We also have the Capture Lagos, I mean, using the device of smartphones to be given to the neighborhood watch and a couple of our officers and other people who want to post photographs on the platform. We will be able to also monitor building constructions going on within the state of Lagos and around. So yeah, I mean, collapse building is something that will continue. You understand, particularly when we have some distressed building. But in order to make sure that we put a stop to those ones that, because there are different types of collapses. There are the ones that are ongoing. You understand, and then there are the ones that are caused by human errors. There are the ones that are caused by operational issues like monitoring and control. Then we also have the buildings that have been built a very long time ago. Just like human beings will die, there are some buildings will become dilapidated, they'll become distressed, and one day they will have to give way. So internationally, what you see is when you get to that point where buildings are now giving some, I mean, they're showing weaknesses, those buildings are removed and replaced. That's why we have, I mean, in the terminologies we have in planning, we have construction, deconstruction, development, redevelopment, conservation, preservation. So you have many terminologies, and I believe that those things are made for the built environment. Is definitely not a word that is just out of the ordinary. So those things will happen at one point or the other. So I would like to end by saying that definitely, the issue of collapse building in Lagos is now a thing of the past, given to the activities of the Lagos State Building Control, and particularly because we have now decided to have professionals from the outside also help join hands with us and monitor this.
So, is there any advice you have for the built industry?
Well, the built industry, I mean, is made up of a number of participants. So you have we as government, we are participants. You have the construction companies, they are participants. You have the developers in terms of the owners of the properties, they are participants. You also have the professional bodies, they are participants. You have the media like you, and even the ordinary man on the street who has not even built a house, do you understand, but sees a construction that is going on, is a participant. So the advice I have is all hands must be on deck. We must be each other's brother's keeper. I mean, if you see something, say something.
Also, the agency carried out its routine enforcement and monetary activities across the state, areas like Mushin, Ebute-Metta, Alimosho, and Etiosa.
The Lagos State Building Control Agency (LASBCA) has resealed 7 buildings over contravention of building permits and breaking of government seal in Ikoyi, Lekki, Etiosa, and Surulere Axis. Following the directive of LASBCA General Manager Architect Gbolahan Owodunni-Oki, the LASBCA Director of Enforcement, Mr. Olusoji Olaopa, led his team to monitor and enforce full compliance of all construction acts.
We are taking a more aggressive approach, step to ensuring the prevention of building collapse and the attendant consequences that it brings. The sorrow, the grief, the embarrassment, the loss of lives. We are here to ensure that we are more aggressive in our approach to stem this particular embarrassment to the state. Here to seal up these premises and some of the other premises that we do, ensure that there's full compliance, that the seals are not being broken, that people don't, immediately after we have gone, jump back into the premises and continue to work. Or as you can see that in some few places, we have found that to be the case. And we have made some arrests in those cases. But where people have exceeded their approval limits. We are also to ensure that they revert back to the particular approval that has been given to them. We will not tolerate the case of exceeding approval limits without, the proper procedure. Of those buildings, they will be subjected to necessary tests, necessary assessments by the agency and by other relevant agencies of government. They will be brought into the frame.
Mr. Olusoji Olaopa condemned the sleeping on site by the laborers.
To board their laborers or workers on site under construction is highly unacceptable. It's against all safety regulations. It's against building ethics and construction ethics. You need to find a place for them. They are not meant to sleep under the construction. Please, that is not acceptable. And of course, the agency, the ministry, is seriously frowning at that and it will no longer be tolerated.
What do you think a distressed building is? Shay, you know I'm not a professional in this, but from what I know, right, you can say that a distressed building it's when a structure or the entirety of a structure or its members have been subjected permanently to some stresses, that exceeds the load bearing capacity of that structure. So basically, you can say that that building is in a state of disrepair. I think, from my knowledge, I think that's what it is.
So now with this your knowledge, can you identify what are the signs you see that
With
okay,
this, my knowledge,
this structure is
right?
stressed.
It will usually be like the building will show signs of cracks. And you sometimes if you go around Lagos Island or certain areas, you can see like a building has tilted or is shifted,
Yeah.
or there's something called spalling. I can't define that right now. Or you could say you also see these structures like you can see exposure of its aggregate members, right? And then we need to also be aware that not all of these signs are very easily identified.
Yeah.
You don't see them with your physical eyes.
Because sometimes when you go for enforcement, they
Yeah.
will say things like, "Oh, but there's nothing wrong with this building."
Exactly.
Until you carry out an NDT.
An NDT, that is where
Yeah.
an NDT comes in, and that's one of the things the Lagos State Agency is recommending. That okay, we can't just say from what we can see that this building is distressed. But you know what? If you believe that your building is like fit for habitation, then carry out a non-destructive test. Let's talk about the structural stability of where you are living or working.
All right. So, guys, it's time to talk to Ronke on the street of Lagos. Let us see what you guys have to say about distressed buildings and collapsed buildings in the state.
So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back.
ẹgbẹ́ tá a bá ti délé tí ó bá ti dá a máa péjọba ní nàá kọ́ wá wò torí tá a bá sọ fún wọn wọ́n lè máa ṣe à ń lẹ̀ tanú wọ́n ń bínú àwọn ni èèyàn dẹ̀ ń bínú èèyàn kan tó ẹni tí ilé bá pa yẹn ń sìn ṣé ẹni tó kù yẹn máa tún jí mọ́ ìyẹn lè rí mọ́ náà tó bó ṣe rí nìyẹn.
To determine a distressed house completely, it must be on proper examination. So, telling you this, I am just guessing and how I feel.
If you see a distressed building, will you report it to our office?
One time, I will come and see this house, so it's not doing well. I will.
We've been lectured some years back about building collapse. They gave us some phone numbers that if we see any house that is distressed, we should call. We called some times ago, years back, but nothing happened. But this time around, I see their effort. I commend their effort anyway. They are trying. They are saving lives. And the one that collapsed about 2nd Street here at Ibadan Street, we just had the noise. Bam! Since then, everybody has been doing what is necessary for their houses. And they marked some houses which they came back to test. And it's good.
See something, say something. So how has Ebute Meta help in this aspect?
We've been helping ourselves, so because we've been telling those landlords, and they have been giving their tenants paper to quit. We have many houses here that they have quit. The tenants have quitted the building, so they are empty now. They are ready for either demolition or what do they call it? Either demolition eh, or refurbishment.
If I see a distressed building, I will tell my friend because I have a friend that is working there. So I will easily call him and tell him that see, oh, this house is weak because I don't want people to die again in Lagos State.
Ronke Johnson reporting from Ebute Metta, Lagos, Maryland. Build well, build right. LASBCA cares. LASBCA TV.
Welcome back, guys. That was an interesting segment. It is good to know now that the public know more about distress building, how to identify one, and also the causes of collapse in the state. Then, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Lagos State Building Control Agency is doing an amazing job with public enlightenment.
Do you know that the agency has actually removed several distressed buildings that have been marked for demolition?
Yeah, a lot of those buildings have actually failed structurally. And this is why next we'll be speaking with the Director Enforcement in Lagos State Building Control Agency to further enlighten us on this topic.
My name is Ola Soji, Director Enforcement, Lagos State Building Control Agency. The agency is doing all its codes, and we are intensifying efforts. We are doubling our efforts. We have adopted a more aggressive approach in making sure all officers are on top of their game with respect to routines, inspections, as and when due, and make sure that people are in full compliance. And when we find any project or structure that is not complying, then we do our best to ensure compliance, and enforce compliance in that regard. We work with all the supervising directors in various districts, and of course, that all our the agency is spread across all local governments and LCDAs, and that brings it very close to the people. So when there are issues, whether they are reported or people need our officers go on their own to find out or to inspect, we do our best to collaborate. Support their efforts, and making sure that they capture and they get to as many buildings as possible and ensure that everything is okay for demolition. That means all necessary and statutory documents or notices, enforcement notices, have been duly served. And of course, when necessary, the appropriate recommendations have also been made. And by following further directive for the removal of such property, the agency proceed to carry out that enforcement activity, the final enforcement activity, by removing that threat as a building, and we bring it down, remove it so that it does not cause any further harm or damage to anybody, property or life.
How do you manage the evacuation of people during that process?
Okay, that has been very, very an interesting aspect of our job. Of course, to an extent, you would want to empathize with the people, because the fact is things can be very difficult. But more than that, our responsibility, our first priority, is the safety of lives. Okay? As much as we may understand that people may be finding it difficult to find a place to put their heads, we cannot afford people living in an inhabitable condition. Okay, so we approach people, we try to educate them and appeal that they evacuate. And if there is any need to further pacify them by really enforcing, then we go as far as evacuating them from those buildings, with every necessary means within the law. We've had several cases where people have been, our men, our officers, our staffs have been attacked. Because you want to ask somebody to leave a building. To him, he does not see a reason, even though the building could collapse any minute. As long as to him or her, the building has not collapsed, they cannot see the reality of what you are talking about. So, but we as a government, as part of government, we have the responsibility of ensuring that we don't allow people to put themselves under any form of risk whatsoever, to the extent that we have people losing their lives under a collapse. So we get harassed a lot, not in so many cases, violently, even with threatened with guns, with various weapons, with charms, with a lot of verbal abuses are there. Physical abuses are there. Some of our men are also being attacked, even that they end up being admitted in hospitals after such attacks, even with the fact that we also go about with policemen. But we even with the policemen, we try as much as possible to, manage situations so that it does not escalate, or people are not really, in trying to save lives, we do also put lives at risk. So we do our best to manage situations. But of course, those harassment situations and even violent situation arises, in fact, quite often in our line of job. I think all of us have a responsibility. It's a duty of care as far as I'm concerned. Say, if you are trying to build, go through the normal channels, engage the competent persons or the professionals, and then don't do it outside government regulations. Because at the end of the day, you are putting lives at risk. You are putting lives, in danger. It shouldn't be business before, life. It should be life before business. So as much as developers and everybody is trying to make money, real estate is the in thing in most part of the world today. But the fact remains that it must be done professionally, and the house must be fit, for habitation at the end of the day, for us to say, okay, you have done well. Build well, build right, LASBCA cares.
Welcome back. Still on this topic of distress buildings, it is imperative that we recommend that before you commence your construction, you should carry out a soil test, and this is to ensure that the soil can actually carry the load of the structure you're putting on it. Remember, I am not a professional. We also recommend that you would subject your materials to testing, and this is where the Lagos State Material Testing Laboratory comes in. You can ensure that you're not using substandard materials, because the ultimate goal is to mitigate building collapse in Lagos State.
To avoid quackery, involve professionals in every stage of your building construction. And for old and existing structure, regularly carry out the NDT, that's the non-destructive test, to ascertain the structural stability of the building. There is stage inspection from the agency. We'll be discussing more about this in the next episode.
And it's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining in today. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share. You can also follow us on all our social media platforms, which will be on your screen right now.
Until we come your way next time, remember to build well, build right, LASBCA cares.
We do. Bye, everyone.